Howdy. Howdy, what's up? We're about to try to accomplish another episode here on the train that keeps on a chugging, the Currency Podcast. That's not an official tagline. Don't tell anybody that that's what it is. Don't be like, I listened to this podcast called Currency. It's kind of like the train that keeps on a chugging a little bit, in the words of the person that puts it on. I am the person that puts it on. And because of how specific I like to get in describing myself, that's what makes me the person that puts it on. Are you going to be a person that puts it on? That's what I call my audience, where the people that put it on are the thing, instead of, instead of examples of other people calling their audience a thing. It's difficult to get specific when I don't feel like going that far, like going that extra mile. To be extra specific, like I don't necessarily feel like being extraordinary, and then sometimes it's just easier to fall back on the ordinary when instead of I got to put on some pizzazz, like provide a specific example. You know how much, how pizzazz a specific example gets. Said the person that puts it on. But that's me. I saw a movie yesterday in the theaters. I haven't done this in a while. I don't do this that often, and I saw The Northman probably because of all of the interest that I have recently in the Hollow Earth theory. I wanted to watch this movie because I heard that it dealt with myth and is about the Northman. Seems like this movie is about a collection of stories, maybe about Eric the Red, where it's like, I think Eric the Red is the one who went to Iceland first, or is one of the first explorers that went there. Because when they discovered Iceland, like the Vikings or whoever discovered Iceland before they went over to North America, but like Iceland was this undiscovered island for a while, even though there were people already living on it for centuries. It was an undiscovered island, and then it's just like, and then there came a point in history where we're like, okay, it's okay to say that we discovered it or something. Like it went undiscovered, but that for centuries, even though people were living there and had been discovering it and rediscovering it for years and centuries, the island of Iceland, but none of that mattered until we're like, now it's okay to discover it. I don't know if it's like Eric the Red is credited with discovering Iceland. That might be it. He's like one of the first people to go, but like after he went to Iceland, Eric the Red was really interested in discovering new worlds all up in that area, like in the north. But The Northman is a movie about Viking lore, and it's just about myth itself, but kind of like what results in them making this movie is that the movie itself kind of ends up a picture or an image of a myth captured in the idea of the main character. It's like the Northman itself is a myth, and it's the myth that it is the collection of all the things that they showed in the movie, where it's just kind of like Eric the Red and whatever is going on with Vikings and whatever they discovered up in the north, because they're credited with like discovering Iceland, and then like North America and Canada or whatever, and they're all up in that area. It's kind of mythical whatever they accomplish anyway, so it's like um but what interests me about going to this movie and then leaving it is how boring real life is. Real life is very boring in comparison to a movie. But like there's that thing when you go to a movie theater, and then when the movie's done, it's kind of awkward. Or like the movie is done, and for a split second when the movie ended, I felt like I was on the same team as everybody in the theater. But like I didn't let that thought inhabit my mind or linger. I just walked out of the theater before I felt a false sense of unity with the people I just witnessed this event with, because it's like it's no small thing that you witness with a movie, because it's just like fictionalized scenario. Well, it's like this epic that lasted for over 2 hours, and it's portraying this world that is like really full of heroes and action and all this crazy shit that doesn't happen in real life. And so it's really amazing that anybody on Earth is inspired to put together this movie, like devote that much time and energy to making this epic movie. Like, how do you get inspired enough to like try to recreate whatever the Vikings were doing? Um, but like, and so the inspiration involved, and then inspiring events that become inspiring to that inspire people, did it, and then it might inspire me to do something. I mean, like hypothetically that might happen, but like I might be inspired by the movie, but it's like then I walked out of the theater and into real life, and that's what's shocking about that thing where you leave a movie theater, is that like then you go into your real life where nothing is idealized, because when somebody makes a movie, they've collected a lot of they've really cut out all the boring parts, and it's just so much better than the world. But like real life is really boring in comparison to what's going on in the Northman. And like real life is never that much about fate or destiny. Like I don't ever have to make a choice between like my loved ones and then fighting my enemies to the death, or like that really doesn't happen very often for me, is what I've found. And so like it's too bad that real life is boring as shit, but that's what's crazy about movies. And then there's um and so that's what's crazy about movies, but they're like cinema as an entire genre is really really overwhelming, but it's like you never get to the point where you're like we don't even need movies. But sometimes when I'm watching movies, like there's a scene in every movie that's about um like Vikings or dirty people of the North, but basically Vikings, where a Viking is eating soup really like and looks really dirty, and is like not considering that they're eating soup because they're just like a Viking, and then they're just like shoving it into their face and beard. Like there's one of those scenes in every one of these Viking movies or TV shows. There's at least one. And it's like moments like that in movies make me think that maybe we didn't even need movies to begin with. Like maybe some of the hidden treasures of cinema don't need to be found, such as like soupy beard core, when that plays out. This is like we're in a soupy beard era of sorts. My question is, why haven't they made that movie that's just like the 30-second clip of a Viking shoving porridge into their face while they're talking to somebody, but then extend that out for 2 hours so that it's a 2 hour movie of just that thing happening. Like, I wouldn't go and watch that. Just my problem is why haven't they made that movie yet? You've done everything else. It's not like Captain America exists in reality, and a Viking eating soup aggressively for 2 hours in a row also doesn't exist in reality. I don't see what the problem is. You can make that movie. Why doesn't somebody? Um, I mean, it probably wouldn't make a lot of money. And then you call it Soupy Beards. But then, unfortunately, it turns out that it's a romantic comedy about beards, but not the facial hair. Like, you know, beards. And then that's what it turns out to be. And then I mean, if it was romantic comedy, maybe it makes more. I mean, people are like, oh, that's kind of quirky. Probably any movie that wasn't 2 hours of somebody pouring soup and like shoving soggy bread into a sweaty beard would make more money than that movie that was 2 hours about um, of somebody or a Viking, somebody or say a Viking, or say a Viking, or say a person, or I mean, it's either somebody or a Viking that did it. We gotta figure out who the culprit is. But it's like it would be difficult. I wouldn't want to be a Captain America in a movie, like have to portray that. That just seems like such a difficult task. Like, who is Captain America enough in reality that they're like actually gonna pull it off on screen? That's not that easy. Or is it just easy to pretend to be a superhero? Uh, it can't be that easy to like I would find it maybe exhausting to try to continue to be a man. Like you have to pull off man the entire movie. Maybe I'm just not enough of a man to do that, but it's like there's being a man and then there's like being the guy that looks like a man. Um like putting on a man, that sounds exhausting to me. Like for example, people who are in a motorcycle gang, and these people exist. Maybe fewer of them exist now than did in like the 70s, but they still have organized biker gangs, right? They probably just don't have as much power as they did, where it's like in the 70s, the Sons of Anarchy or the Hells Angels. Now it's like the biker gangs are that exist are just in TV shows because they're not for real. But it's almost like to me, as far as I picture it, the life of somebody in a biker gang is has got to probably play out something like a TV show. Like if you have to maintain being tough all the time, that would be exhausting. That's what I'm picturing. Is that like really in real life being in a biker gang would suck because you would have to be tough and be a man. You'd have to like pull that off for everybody. If you're wearing like a sleeveless leather jacket and riding a chopper around, um, I feel like that would be exhausting to like maintain that identity, but I guess that's just like people, I guess some people just do that. It's almost like it's just that like looking like a man. I guess some people it's just the case that like well, if you're the alpha, then you don't even think about that you are. Is that real? To me, it seems like maybe it's a little bit of a myth, but then you're not the alpha. If you are taking time to analyze whether you are, then you aren't. But it's like, I mean, obviously that's the way that it is. But it's just that don't tell me that in biker gangs there isn't the guy that they make fun of. Like how much would it suck if you were the guy in the biker gang that people picked on for like not being tough enough? Or it's like within the gang, like there's no way that these biker gangs, there's like 10 people who wear leather jackets and they're in a biker gang and they drive around on their motorcycles, vroom, 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 just for fun. And they're like, we love this. We love doing this. This is our fun little game in life. We're all pals and we like to ride. I mean, I'm not trying to make fun of motorcyclists, uh, bicyclists, because they ride bikes, right? I guess you could call them bicyclists too. Um, when it's just a group of guys and they're riding those bikes around, they're riding their hogs, and they're just like, not anymore. Are we gonna give a fuck? Like, you got it? There's got to be some sort of initiation to get into a biker gang. It's just that like it can't possibly be the case that it's if it's 10 guys in a biker gang that they all respect each other equally. But that's the way that you would probably preconceive it, or how you're supposed to, is that every one of them is so tough and that they've earned everybody's respect so much because they're all bikers and because they wear that leather jacket. But like what defeats that is that there has to be the guy that everybody makes fun of. And how much does it suck to be that and in real life? And those people do exist in real life. They exist right now. There's like the biker gang member who's like 40, but gets made fun of by everybody else. And how much would it suck when your identity is to be so tough when your peers are telling you that you don't belong, but like then the person stays in it because you're like, no, I do belong. Um, it's just like even if you aren't the guy that gets picked on in the biker gang, um, and don't deny that that's happening. And how much does life suck for that person that is having that happen? Because your life is a lie and you know it in your heart. But like, I mean, it doesn't really matter, I guess, because you're still like doing the thing. So it's like you do end up belonging as long as you keep doing it, as long as you keep wearing that leather jacket. This goes out to you, guy, that applies to that, all of that criteria. You meet that criteria, that a kind of person I've been talking about, the guy in the biker gang that gets made fun of. This goes out to you, dude. Like, stay strong. It's on my heart, I guess, to speak to you. And like, so there's probably like a few bikers that are just weeping tears over my beautiful messages from my heart to them today. I would imagine at least a few. Out of every like 50 people, there's at least two bikers, is what science came out and said recently. And they're like, and that is a fact. And it's good on science that they're still keeping their name in the game. Like, did you know that? Do you know that haters don't even know shit? Science just came out with a press release recently and made that statement that they're like, fucking haters don't even know shit. And so I guess science proved it. Did you know that they made that press release just recently? And speaking of when, and speaking of the motorcyclists that chop their way across the country on their chopperinos, they don't give a fuck. They're like, and by the way, we still don't give a fuck. Like when they walk into a bar, um, or they're like, I'll take a rum and coke, but I don't give a fuck about it. It could have been anything. So, do you see this? And they show their arms or something. Do you see my biceps? That's because I ride bikes. Don't question me, ma'am. And so, to me, I picture that. I feel like it would be exhausting to, it would be exhausting to put on being a man constantly, but it's like I feel like there's got to be a lot of actors in Hollywood that when they're tasked with acting like a man, like I don't think that makes you a man. I feel like you have to be a little bit gay if you are good at playing like quintessential men in movies, because like acting like a man is not real, that really doesn't like substitute being a man. But then there's people that are like actually dominant and then they do both of those, like really being a man, and or like there's putting it on, because it's not like putting it on makes you not a man. Like acting like a man does sort of make you one. It's just that like um I'm talking about like if you're good at acting like a man, you're probably maybe a little bit gay, like Jim in The Office. He's got to be at least a little bit gay, right? That kind of thing where it's like he's playing such a straight guy so well for so long. Like that doesn't mean that is like that does not make the actor a man in real life. Obviously, you would already know because he's playing a character, but like it's just that people do that in regular life, not for TV shows, not for movies. Um, where they will just play a straight guy. And I mean, I have been guilty of that in the past. I just mean like always being a straight guy. Because like if you're trying really hard to be a straight guy, you're probably gay. But I'm not the first person in the world to say things like this, or like you should already know. This shouldn't come as a shock to you. If somebody is like overtly trying to be straight, then I mean, I've heard Chris D'Elia say that like years and years ago. Like every people already know that is the case. It's just that like um, putting it on. I'm not saying that guy is. I know that he's married to Emily Blunt, but that doesn't doesn't necessarily mean anything. If you want to see something interesting, watch Larry King's interview of John Krasinski, because Larry King tears him to shreds. But you wouldn't necessarily know that in just watching the interview, if you're not somebody who thinks very critically, like I think very critically about interviews, or sometimes, and that's just what I do sometimes, or all the time. I'm a critical thinker. I critique people, and it's not even a good thing. Like, I'm maybe a little bit judgmental. That's maybe what I'm saying. Like, criticize things, but like I watch an interview between Larry King and John Krasinski, and I'm just like, I'm analyzing how John Krasinski reacts to the questions, because Larry King is just a pro at interviewing and has been doing it for years and years. And he actually asks really pointed questions that can be embarrassing. Like, Larry King is an amazing interviewer. And in my opinion, John Krasinski didn't hold up well in this interview. Like, to me, it was so bad I had to pause it and just like think about what was just said in the interview. Like, to me, it was very cringe to watch that interview. But most people would watch it because, based on what the comments on the video said, they're like, John Krasinski is just the most wholesome guy. Like, they watched the interview and thought nothing of it. But I watched it, I was like, wow, Larry King is really going after him. But like, it doesn't look like that on the surface if you don't watch a ton of interviews, which I do, because I'm smart, because I'm an aficionado of interviews, and because of that aficionadicity, that quality that I have, that I take with me around to places, that I bring to places. I'm like, maybe you didn't know, but just by the way that I appear and present myself, maybe you could have figured out that I have a certain aficionadicity that is contagious, that hopefully you'll catch yourself. That's what I say. Hopefully not. But why was I talking about that? Just because I'm being a tool? Any one thing that I'm talking about is just because I'm trying to gain an advantage over somebody else in the world. Like, now I have to put somebody down. It can't just be positivity, I guess. Like, I'm not positive enough. I can't, like, if you don't have anything good to say, then don't say to good any good thing at all. If you don't have anything good to say, then you don't say anything. That I didn't get the memo, because it's like, oh, I'm saying something. Of course, it's at somebody else, the behest of somebody else, or like somebody else is losing. I'm just kidding. It's not really. I don't do that often. I don't have to tear people down to build myself up, because I'm not a loser, at least not all of the time. I don't always win, but this must be my problem, what I'm analyzing, being a man. It's just that, like, the actions that make you look like a man, obviously it doesn't make you one. And so I'd like to explore this. It's just that the idea of a man is, maybe that can just get into myth itself, or it's kind of a religious thing, where the Bible, I mean, I won't talk about why the Bible influences us to live like monogamous relationships, because we always uphold the Bible to be important and true, and like the setting of the Bible is a monogamous relationship between one man and one woman. And like, we always seem to find that important as long as we live within the era defined by Christ, which is the time period that we live in. We always find it important, the marriage. But I don't want to talk about religious things, because if you talk negatively about a person's beliefs, then people don't like you, because you can't talk about people's beliefs, because it's so sacred when somebody believes something for some reason, even though it isn't. Like, why is it sacred that somebody believed something? It's not. It's just sacred when lots of people believe it. Like, when lots of people have the religion, that's when you can't cross the beliefs of the religion. That's when, like, the people around you get angry at you just to protect you, really, because you're like, because they're like, don't cross the power, don't cross like the power and resources of this large group of people that believes this, because those are their beliefs. But you're not supposed to cross beliefs because of the adverse reactions you'll get in return, because beliefs are so deep seated. Like, belief itself is such a deep issue. For you to believe something, apparently, like, believing something is so amazing that you always have the right to just like get pissed or fight back when somebody says something against what you believe. Um, and so what am I saying? I'm saying that I don't, am I saying, it doesn't matter. I'm just getting into a territory of douchery. So let me decelerate on the douchery for just a second, and not talk about what it means for somebody to believe something. And it's the same thing as that beard that gets soup collected in it. That's a Viking. Going along with that line of speech. Um, what else was I going to say today? It doesn't matter. I think that this is just free form, you know, like what ABC Family is now. That's what this is. It's free form. And who knows what kind of programming that they have under the name Freeform, under the flagship enterprise known as Freeform. But let me talk about currency or something. Let me talk about currency. It's just that in the Patriot, when they um, in the Patriot, when it's Mel Gibson and his son, and they're like, they eat an apple at the same time, you know, that scene in the movie The Patriot. Like, congratulations. I guess that's what makes you a man, is when you eat an apple at the same time as somebody who's the same as you, just a different generation. Like, two generations of the same lineage eating an apple simultaneously. That's what makes you a patriot, is what the movie The Patriot speaks to me, among other things. But it's like, wow, it's like there's such men that they didn't even consider eating that apple, but they did it at the same time, like, you know, and they like, it's so simple and so beautiful because they're just motivated by hunger. I guess that's what happens when you get hungry. You eat an apple at the same time as your dad. I mean, that's just, they're like so primitive. And in some senses, that's maybe what makes you an American, I guess, as long as that's one of the things that's patriotic about Mel Gibson and his family line, is like, when like they're both eating, I mean, they're right next to each other. They both ate that apple. I mean, I guess the movie is just talking about that people were stupider back, people were more animalistic. I mean, obviously that same thing could happen now. It's just that I've never seen that in real life. That's just one of those things that only happens in movies. It's the same thing where it's like real life is actually very boring. Like, it really struck me how different, how like, I've never, it's kind of weird, I've never walked out of a movie really thought that, but I have thought, like, it's kind of weird to walk out of a movie just back into life. I think that's because life is so, doesn't match up with that movie at all. And so it's just like, the movie is a motion picture. It's a collection of images that, did you know that? It's a collection of images. Have you ever heard that before? You probably haven't, because and it really took me to open your eyes. See, oh, it's like a motion picture. Just kidding. It didn't really take me for you to say, to notice this collection of images. It's just that, like, leaving the theater. But, you know, they eat that apple, and I'm convinced, I guess they're, as long as they weren't thinking about it, But that's what I'm saying is like if you're in the Northman and you're the lead character of that, you have to do all these things that like they look like a man and then I mean act like you're not thinking about it, even though if you're like acting in a movie, you are thinking about it because you're choosing to put on a character the entire time. So like that would be exhausting to me to like uh try to make it so that definitely everyone who would watch this would perceive you to be a man. It's just that perceptions suck so much. Like trying to think about what somebody else would perceive you to be is not the way that life is supposed to be lived. And yet, like it's not that hard to get in the territory of trying to look like a man the way that other people would perceive it. It's just that like that's what happens in real life sometimes is that obviously maybe it's just an inundation with too many Netflix shows, inundation with so much entertainment that you can get that they're just like pictures of things, like pictures of a man that you watch in entertainment and movies. It would be easy to start like I mean, where that would be interfering with your life, where I mean, if you're influenced by TV and movies enough, where it's like a man acting like a man, be or just I mean, influence of actors or acting itself, like that definitely influences people, or like it brings about more of a world where acting is important, and so then it might interfere. It's just I would like to go after the person who's like yeah, well, you don't even if you don't know what it's like to be an alpha because what it's like to be one, you don't even think about it. It's just that like if you are saying something like that, because I've heard this from people in some people say this. Like I've seen it and I've heard it and it's real. Not really anybody that I know, just kind of like in movie or somebody that I see in interviews, like people on YouTube or that are in the public sphere that they're like when you're in the public sphere, you're kind of putting on a persona. I just think that it's kind of unintelligent if you say that you're the person that is so alpha that you don't even consider that you wouldn't be one, and then anybody who isn't like that, you're just on the outside looking in, then you don't know what it's like. But that's what the whole thing is about, is like, or that's what people don't like about alphas is like the people that want to criticize alphas bring it to the forefront to tell people like, you should really consider that people perceive you to be an alpha, and then it fucks with the entire thing, like making somebody aware. But that's kind of like, uh, I mean, that's sort of like what a woman does for a man, and exemplified in the Adam and Eve story is like making a man aware of the thing that they do. I mean, not that a woman can't be made aware of something that makes her look womanly. It's just more like I feel like women don't care as much about looking like a woman. Not that I know. This is a dumb thing to talk about as a one guy on a podcast, especially in today's climate. I couldn't speak on whatever experience of a woman. So try to compare that. Like, but like women are always getting on men for like, oh, you're not a, I mean, you better be a man, you know, you know how that works. I just don't like, I don't care about that. I'm just saying that it's better to leave the world where you're trying to look like a man. That's my whole point, is that you really would never be an alpha if you were trying to look like a man, is what I'm saying. Um, if you're trying to look like one, like, no, oh, it's just so easy to try to look like a man in a world that emphasizes male role models, or like who do you look up to, or everybody seems to think that you need to have a positive dad or something, and if you don't have a positive dad then you're going to be looking for one, or and this whole search would make you not an alpha. like searching for a male role model, the person who looks like a man enough so that you can emulate them, so that you can be a man. Like emulating a man, that is not as much being a man as just ignoring that whole drama of trying to look like one. Ignoring the drama is better. But like, at what point are you able to ignore the drama? Maybe, I mean, that's everybody's individual fight. If you're a man, it's just that like, uh, being a man, it's good to have young men who lead other men, or like I don't think that that matters. Like you don't need to narrow it down or specify it to like, oh, a man. I don't think if you're like a young man looking for a leader man, that's a dumb thing to look for potentially. Like I don't want to speak out of turn. I'm just saying like I don't think it'll ever be fulfilling to try to recreate, like be the same thing as another man that you see. Like trying to recreate the image of a man for other people is never fulfilling, or at least it's not as good of a thing to do. um it's just like this assumption that there's like like role models themselves, I guess I kind of have a problem with. Isn't that earth shattering this morning that you heard me say that? Your earth better be shattered once you found out that me or any person in the world had that thing to say. And so hopefully reality for you is completely different as a result of some of the messages that you've heard. And like it's I guess people would have a problem with that, right? What I'm saying, where they'd be like, you can't. I'm just kind of criticizing the reality of a man, but they came out with that movie Men, or they're coming out with it. And it's just that at the point that society is creating works of art that are titled a thing like that, is the point that society is processing that enough. They're like throwing it out into the open when it's like a blockbuster enough of a movie that like everybody knows that it exists. I'm saying that this movie gets enough visibility because like whatever, whoever's producing it, it gets thrown in everybody's face enough that like I know that there's a movie called Men. Like that's the point at which society is sort of processing the idea, or like that's an overt criticism of the entire reality, the entire genre of men, is to make a movie about men. And this movie is also like probably a negative picture of them, or it highlights some of the negative qualities that would be represented in all men. I definitely want to see it because to me that's something that that movie has to be about, is that it's like a criticism of the culture of men themselves. And so there would be a lot of people who would be upset about me saying like or it like saying something about being a man, because like you should try to, because people would say you should try to be a man. But I feel like isn't that the problem? Or that's what a lot of comedians go after, that like Bill Burr will go after that by saying that he has this bit where he's like, I think it's him. He has this bit where he's like, I'm gonna carve a pumpkin, and he's like, I wanted to carve a pumpkin, and then he went to Walmart or wherever that there were pumpkins, and then he was like gonna reach in to get it, but then in his head he heard someone say like, "Oh, what are you, a pussy? You're gonna carve a pumpkin?" And so then he walked out of Walmart without buying one, because and everybody loves that bit, and they love Bill Burr for saying things like that because it's like a landmark moment in society that somebody is mentioning, like the problem of always looking like a man to the point of like, oh, I can't carve a pumpkin or whatever, and really just like crying where anybody could see you. Like it's assumed that men shouldn't be crying, and now there's a lot of a lot of comedians that are, they talk about that they cry, and I find that that is obnoxious. But like it's more a thing to talk about, or like say that you cried and you're cool as a result of that, or like because you wouldn't normally say that, or you want to look better than that, you would be crying. I really kind of think that, but like I'm saying that society is kind of going after this idea of a man, and then there are a lot of people, probably like religious people, probably Christians, don't like that you would say that you're gonna like get outside of the idea of a man because you should always try to be a man, or otherwise you're not being one. Or like it's a people would think that it's a degradation of men, and then I mean, but that's what the whole gender fluidity thing is about. Like gender fluidity as an idea has gained a lot of traction and lot of popularity, but that's because uh, like visualizing an entire thing to take place on a spectrum, like the spectrum between man and a woman, is just a more intelligent way of seeing things. And spectrums are a very useful tool to analyze things more intelligently or plot out more points of data and see how they're separated. Spectrums are very useful tools. Spectrums are uh, just an important realm. I personally think that science is withering away, and spectrums or spectra is a better field than science itself, probably. It's more informative. It's more practical. You can see how they play out, but there's just all these areas where spectrum is introduced into the equation, and it kind of changes a lot of things, like changes our idea of uh, binary, like a man over here and a woman over here, when it's because gender fluidity is just somebody is saying that this exists on a spectrum, don't you realize, which it does, or just relative truths instead of absolute ones in the area of man versus woman, because it is a spectrum, because everybody is like, you're sort of man, sort of woman. Like, it just depends on where you fall on the spectrum ultimately. And so that's why I'm saying like it would be difficult to difficult to be a straight guy all the time. That would be exhausting, because that would, like, if you always have to try to be a man, then I mean, I guess at some point it would appear inauthentic, especially in the world that we live in that's just becoming gayer by the day. Or I like it's almost like the world would want to see something gay out of you, just so that you weren't just trying to make sure you always look straight. But it's just that like people will do a bit where they talk about that they cried, like it's surprising, or they're like, I saw that and then I was bawling afterward, like like they're really embattled. I think that you should have to prove it if you're bragging about that you cried. I just don't know that like crying is something that you should brag about. Maybe you should just let the tears fall in silence. Like that's what it's for. Crying isn't for you to tell it to people later as something that you are proud of. It should, like, if those tears were real, they wouldn't have reached the light of day. Like, keep your tears to yourself. Um, and so is that like in the realm of, well, you gotta try to be a man. Don't tell somebody that you cried. Like, I'm just saying generally, things that are sad are not, they're not for you to bring up later. Like if you're a comedian trying to somehow monetize your tears. Maybe tears aren't meant to be monetized, but, or maybe it just doesn't work out that well. It's just that like if you're going to say to people that you cried, then you should prove it. Like we want to see you cry. Or that's a better thing to say, or a more interesting way of doing it. Like better than a bit where you say like, it's so funny because I cried. I bet you wouldn't expect that I would. What's better than that is if you just went up on stage and just started crying. Hilarious, right? I just like I should end the episode in some way. I guess I'm talking about being a man, but just like the way that people emulate the image of a man. It's just that like but Christians would be upset about it because like Christ is a man and the whole religion is based around like being the best man. And so it's kind of weird, probably if you're a woman. But I mean, if you're a woman, I mean, everybody in the church is the bride of Christ. But like just offshooting, talking about Christians momentarily, but like being a man, uh, trying to look like one, trying to collect something together, uh, trying to collect something together to be one. It's interesting to me how everybody on the planet maintains maintains conversational relevance. Like you don't have to be a man because you if you're a man you already are doing that, but it's kind of like you kind of you have to create something out of nothing. Like if you want to take up responsibility as a man or as a woman, where women are like men and men are like women. If you want to take responsibility, you have to kind of be something in life. And so I am a quality assurance specialist professionally. And I haven't said that on this podcast before just because I don't know how to work it into the thing until just now. I wasn't really trying to keep it from anybody that, well, at the end of the day, I'm just a lowly quality assurance specialist. It's not a fun title to have, so I'm not bringing it up before this or after this probably. But it's like I have to become that, or I have to go and get a degree or do whatever so that somebody hires me as that. And then once I get that title, then what comes with it are like prizes, like money, a salary. And so that's something I have to create that didn't exist before for myself. I have to make myself that thing. And it's like everybody in the world has to do that. And everybody is creating all the time. You're creating something out of nothing. You become a title that you weren't to begin with. And it's weird how little credit we give to people for creating things when that's like as it's just part of survival in the world that we live in. Everybody's creating shit all the time. It's interesting how everybody in the world maintains conversational relevance for themselves and for others, uh, for themselves. And that's something that you have to create. Like, how is it that everybody in the world it maintains conversation that's like relevant? Because you have to talk about things that are at least slightly going on in the world. You have to speak to the current climate, but everybody does that at least to some degree. Like some people are more charismatic, some people are better speakers, more sociable than others. Obviously, not everybody is great at conversations, but everybody creates words that didn't exist before in conversations that are they pertain to like the world or circumstances, different circumstances than previous conversations you've had. Like you have to come up with new words for new conversations. Not everybody is good at it, but everybody is like trying, and everybody mostly like, and just across the entire world, everybody, and because time is new and new things happen, and like the new world of people speaking in conversations is also new, and they're talking about things that have happened that they weren't able to talk about like in previous conversations they had. You have to create, everybody's creating new conversations, everybody's creating new words in conversations for people, like, and we act like people don't create things, or like I think that the dirty truth is that everybody is creative, and then but then we kind of tend to act like, oh, there's the creative people that are like, but it's like too much, that's too much having an absolutist view of the people that create things. Or it's like in order to create something you have to create a movie, when it isn't that way. You actually, it's just in speaking to people you create words, because how does everybody maintain conversational relevance across the entire world? Like as the world changes, people do in what they're creating just to stay relevant. But it's like you have to create in order to connect with people, or survive or do anything, and everybody is doing it in order to survive. Like people create things naturally, and so we don't need to make it this big emphasis on like the people who are the creators of content creators, or like, oh, or like making a song, writing a song, and where did it come from? How did you do that? How, like the process, and how amazing it is that somebody created something. Like it's just kind of probably a natural or instinctive thing that people do. Like people are just naturally creative and a lot more naturally creative than what we're giving credit for a lot of the time. And we don't give it credit because we don't want to get into the area of recognizing ourselves to be creative, because then that comes with it authorities like, oh, you have to create something good, or you're like an artist. Like being creative is different from being an artist. And being creative is different from being an artist, and it's like everybody's creating, everybody, like it's kind of, I would say that it's just more an innate human thing that people are creating than people give it credit for. Like that's, I think that everybody is creative, everybody creates. Unfortunately, that's the case. And so the question would be, what is the extent of that creation? And it might go like how much of your world do you get to create around you? I'd say that I think that if you want to make your life what you want it to be, so you like choose your own path or kind of create it, or create a persona that like things work for you the way that you want them to. Like I'd say that what would help in recognizing your ability to create the world that you want for yourself would be seeing how everybody's already creative, and that you're just like people are creating in a conversation all the time, but like, and that's not nothing, and you like you didn't have those words before, and like you speak them off the top of your head, like everybody improvises conversation, but we act like so much has to go into being like a comedian or something, when it's really like everybody is creating new content just by talking to each other. And like going out and being responsible for the things that you're creating, or like creating yourself to be something. um so it's like being and then being a man, I guess, is just kind of an identity that people think that they need to fulfill for other people, or like they need to see me be a man, or it's like kind of like being a leader, I guess. It's like being a man. And is that necessary to be a man? Like that specifically? Like it's that specifically? I don't know. I don't know. I think that it's good to be a man, or like aim to have that mentality, or like put that vibe out there, but you'll probably be less of one if you're always trying to be one. And it's like saying that you never got there. I like always if you're always like emulating role models, which is so easy to do because you have nothing but examples of it through like the Jordan Petersons of the world, who are like, their persona is that they're a dad for everybody. Like even as a 30-year-old, it's pretty easy to say, I'm not like, I'm looking up to Jordan Peterson. He's my example of a man. Like if I'm that man, then I really am a man. It's easy to have somebody who's ahead of you, and I'm just thinking about like, is it beneficial? Like it's nice to have that influence. Of course, it's beneficial to look at the way that Jordan Peterson is a man, and like I want to be that man. But it's also like, don't lose sight of that. If you're a man biologically, you're already a man, and so there's not like, it's not like becoming more like Jordan Peterson or any of these other people in pop culture that you could emulate. It's not like being more like them is what's going to make you that. But if we get into the territory of like, I never had a real father figure, or like if you're always searching for one, that can be to the detriment of whatever of your quest, or it's like just get over that drama, or focus on better things. Realize that you already are a man, and so there's not like a guy that needs to come along to show you how to be one. It's the same as creating. You don't need an example of somebody making content to tell you like what you could be like as a creator. Or it's like, I wish I was creative the way that the entertainers I watch are creative. I think that that's already there, and so just recognize your power and your ability to create. It's, if you like to create things, I'm just saying that that's an inherent thing. creativity. There are things like this that are inherent rather than that we have to outsource them to like, oh, I need an example of it. Like there might be too much of that goes on in the world, and then it creates more just rigmarole, like rules, like, oh, I have to do the things that this person does, like you're following rules so that you end up the same as somebody else when when that is already within you. And so, like, to produce something, produce who you are for other people. Um, like it's not a production. It doesn't have to be production. Like you're already naturally producing only what you are able to do all the time. And so, it's whatever. Something about morality and morals, but I don't know. Thanks for listening. I should have more. I should have maybe the next episode I do is like a YouTube reaction videos again. And so, thanks for listening. Goodbye.